I always believed I knew my husband, or at least that's what I thought. On the outside, he was everything anyone could wish for. Charming, attentive, the kind of man people would admire without hesitation. Friends would compliment me, saying how lucky I was to have such a devoted husband, and I would smile, feeling a warm pride, though sometimes a small nagging doubt would brush against the edges of my mind. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that it was normal to feel a little uncertain at times. At first, the doubts were subtle, almost insignificant. A missed call here, an unexplained excuse there. Nothing concrete, nothing to truly alarm me. He would shrug off my questions with a calmness that seemed genuine, always ready with a plausible story. But I couldn't ignore the fleeting moments that made me uneasy. The way his eyes would flicker nervously at a message on his phone, the tiny inconsistencies in the stories he told, the way he sometimes seemed distant, lost in thoughts he didn't want to share. Every small thing tugged at the corner of my mind, but I pushed it aside. I didn't want to see anything wrong. I didn't want to believe that the life I had built with him could be anything but real. And then, the illusion shattered in the most ordinary way. I was scrolling through my phone when I saw it. A message, short and casual, yet it hit me like a thunderclap. I can't wait to see you tonight. She has no idea. My hands froze. My breath caught. The words seemed to blur on the screen. Impossible, yet undeniable. I read them again, hoping my mind had tricked me, that there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, I already knew there wasn't. In that moment, every memory I had of us together twisted into something unrecognizable. Every laugh, every tender gesture, every shared secret felt like a carefully painted illusion. The man I had trusted with my heart, the one I had believed was mine in every way, was not the person I thought he was. He was a stranger who had been wearing a mask that hid the life he was secretly living behind my back. I felt the ground shift beneath me, my world tilting as I realized that everything I had known, everything I had believed, was built on lies. And the man I had loved, the man everyone admired, had been playing a role, performing a part while hiding a truth I was only now discovering. The shock left me numb, my mind struggling to process the betrayal in slow, disjointed fragments. I remembered every small sign I had dismissed, every uneasy feeling I had brushed aside, and now they all came together, forming a pattern I could no longer ignore. The trust I had taken for granted, the bond I had cherished, felt like a fragile illusion that had been shattered in a single instant. And for the first time, I saw him clearly, not as the loving husband I thought I knew, but as a stranger who had lived a double life in the shadows of my life, hiding behind a mask of charm, attention, and perfection. For weeks, I tried to convince myself that I was wrong, that perhaps I had jumped to conclusions. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. I told myself. Maybe he was talking to a friend, or handling something innocent that I simply didn't know about. I clung to those thoughts desperately, trying to protect myself from the growing unease that gnawed at my chest. But the more I watched, the more I saw. Subtle things that didn't fit, small details that refused to add up. It wasn't anything dramatic, nothing that could be pointed to and called betrayal outright. There were no explosive arguments, no glaring confrontations. Instead, it was the quiet, almost invisible cracks that began to appear. The hidden bank statements tucked away in drawers, the secret messages that popped up at odd hours, the sudden work trips that seemed to materialize out of thin air, always at inconvenient times, always unexplained. Each lie was tiny, almost insignificant if taken on its own, but when stacked together, they formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. I started noticing his habits in a new light. The way he shifted when I asked him something simple, how his eyes would dart away, avoiding mine entirely. That easy, practiced charm I once admired began to feel hollow, rehearsed. Every smile he gave me seemed like it had a secret hiding behind it, and every laugh felt like a carefully scripted performance meant to distract me from the truth. My stomach tightened every time I caught him in these little acts, and the weight of it began to press down on me, slow and relentless, even the ordinary moments. Sitting across from him at the dinner table, walking side by side on the street, sharing a quiet morning coffee, started to feel tainted. I could sense the hidden tension beneath his calm exterior, a tension that whispered that the man I had loved so deeply was not entirely who I thought he was. Every day, every small lie, every little evasion added another brick to a wall of doubt, until my once safe world began to feel fragile, like it could crumble at any moment. It wasn't easy to confront him. My heart pounded, my hands trembled slightly, and 1,000 fears raced through my mind. I was terrified. Terrified of being wrong. Terrified of shattering the life I had known. Terrified of confirming the worst. Every instinct screamed at me to wait, to step back, to pretend everything was normal. But I couldn't. I couldn't keep pretending. Couldn't keep living under the same roof with a man whose life was built on a foundation of lies. That evening, I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I looked at him across the room. Calmly, almost unnaturally calm, I asked, "Are you hiding something from me?" The words felt strange leaving my mouth, almost foreign in their quiet steadiness, but I held my ground, refusing to let fear twist them into hesitation. He laughed, but it wasn't the easy, charming laugh I had grown used to. It was nervous, hollow, brittle, the kind of laugh that cracks under pressure. "What are you talking about?" he said, his tone attempting casualness, but failing to mask the tension that had crept into his voice. And then I saw it, the flicker of panic in his eyes, a brief, lightning-quick shift that betrayed him before he could cover it up. That split-second crack, gone as quickly as it appeared, said everything. He was lying. My chest tightened as a wave of realization washed over me. All the unease, all the doubts, all the little inconsistencies that had haunted me for weeks suddenly aligned, forming a clear, undeniable picture. The truth, the real, undeniable truth, had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long, hidden in plain sight, waiting for this moment to reveal itself. And now, staring at him, I no longer had to wonder. I knew. I had seen the mask slip, if only for a heartbeat, and it was enough. When I finally uncovered the full story, it felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. My chest tightened so much I could barely breathe, and my hands shook as I held the documents, the messages, the evidence I never wanted to see but had been forced to uncover. It wasn't just a lie here or there. It was an entire tapestry of deception that stretched across every corner of our lives. He hadn't only lied to me, he had lied to everyone we knew, friends, family, colleagues at work, neighbors, anyone who had ever trusted him. The man I had believed in, the man I had shared my life with, had built a second life in secret, carefully crafting a reality that kept me blind to the truth. I couldn't stop thinking about the audacity of it all. It wasn't just that he had lied. It was the ease with which he wove falsehoods into every conversation, the way he made it seem natural, effortless, even charming. He had perfected a performance so convincing that I, someone who knew him better than anyone else, had doubted my own instincts. Every question I had asked that went unanswered, every gut feeling I had dismissed, suddenly made sense. And yet, the most infuriating part was the way he had made me feel, like I was being unreasonable. He made me question my own mind, my own perception of reality, turning the victim into the one who seemed wrong. I remember sitting alone in our living room that night, the house silent around me, holding the evidence that had shattered my sense of security. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, betrayal, anger, disbelief, and grief all colliding in a storm I couldn't control. I kept asking myself how someone I had trusted with my entire heart could betray me so completely. How could a person act with such cold calculation, hiding a life so deliberately from the one person they promised to love and protect? Every memory I had of him now felt tainted. Every smile and kind gesture, suspect. It wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. That night, I realized that the betrayal went deeper than I had ever imagined. It wasn't merely emotional pain. It was an invasion of my life, my trust, my sense of safety. He had assumed control over my reality, and in doing so, he had stripped away my right to know the truth about my own life. That understanding hit me harder than anything else. And then, beneath the rage and heartbreak, a strange clarity emerged. I understood that I couldn't stay in the shadows of his lies, that I couldn't allow someone who had no right to manipulate my life to continue holding that power. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also awakened something within me, a need to reclaim my life, to stand up, and to confront the deception head on. That night, in the stillness of my living room, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not let his lies define me. I would not let him control my world any longer. I would find a way to reveal the truth. I didn't act immediately. My hands wanted to move, to throw the phone, to rip up the papers, to make him feel the same sharp panic I'd felt. But I stopped myself. Anger was raw and loud, and I knew if I let it lead, he'd find a way to turn it back on me. He was a practiced liar. He knew how to twist a scene, how to make me look unstable for daring to doubt him. So I chose a different weapon: patience. I started small and quiet. At first it felt almost clinical, a checklist instead of a plan. But there was comfort in the order of it. I made a folder on my laptop, and another in a small lockbox I tucked away. I printed things and took screenshots, labeling dates and times like a detective who didn't want to miss a single thread. Emails that contradicted his stories. Transactions on accounts he said I couldn't access. Screenshots of messages that erased any reasonable doubt. Phone records, timestamps, little inconsistencies in receipts. I didn't rely on memory alone anymore. I turned everything into proof. I learned to be methodical. I copied messages to multiple places. I saved backups. I even made notes about the moments that felt wrong. The way his voice changed. The times he left the room to take a call. The way he became oddly defensive when I asked where he'd been. Those notes felt ridiculous at first, but later they stitched together into a pattern that made lying impossible to explain away. At the same time, I thought about timing. If I exposed him too soon, he could gaslight me, delete records, or invent a story that swallowed mine whole. If I waited too long, he might bury whatever little truth I'd already uncovered. So I mapped out options: confront alone, tell someone close first, or lay everything out where others could see. I weighed consequences, not in theory, but in terms of real people I cared about. I imagined faces, reactions, the cascade that would follow. That helped me decide how public I needed to be. Preparing myself was harder than preparing the evidence. I practiced speaking in front of the mirror, not to rehearse lines, but to find the calm in my voice. Anger flares up and burns out. Composure lasts. I practiced breathing slowly, holding my ground when my throat tightened, and answering questions without begging for certainty. I reminded myself that control was not the same as cruelty. Exposing him wasn't about making him suffer. It was about reclaiming my life and protecting the people around me from his fabrications. I reached out quietly to one person I trusted, a sister I knew would hold space, not judge. I told her I needed someone who could be steady if things went sideways. That support became a safety net, someone who could corroborate when I needed it, someone to call in the middle of the night when doubts clawed back in. Strength doesn't have to be solitary. Sometimes it's the quiet alliance you build before the storm. There were nights I almost lost my nerve. I'd picture him pleading, apologize, explain. And a tiny part of me wanted to believe it, to return to the version of us that had felt safe. But then I would open the folder, run my finger over the evidence, and the fog lifted. The facts didn't need theatrics. They were steady, immovable. That steadiness became my backbone. When the moment finally came, I wanted to move with clarity, not chaos. I wanted the truth to arrive like a line drawn in the sand. Clean, undeniable, and final. Planning my response wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was an act of self-preservation. I was not the person he could manipulate with noise and performance. I would be the person who showed up with proof, with calm, and with the courage to take my life back. For weeks, I moved through our home like a ghost in plain sight, pretending everything was normal. I laughed at his jokes, even the ones that made me cringe, and asked him about his day with the casual interest of someone who had no idea what was really going on. I kept up appearances flawlessly, for friends who dropped by, for family who called, and even for myself, reminding myself that composure was my shield. He had no idea that I already knew, no inkling that the carefully constructed life he had built on lies was teetering on the edge of collapse. There's a strange, almost intoxicating satisfaction in that kind of calm. To walk beside someone who has spent years manipulating reality while holding the power of truth quietly in your hands is a feeling both terrifying and liberating. I could see the little things, the cracks in his confidence. Though he didn't know I noticed, I watched him make plans, boast about things he thought impressive, laugh at stories he thought convincing, and I let it all happen because every word, every gesture, every lie he revealed unknowingly became part of the evidence that would soon expose him completely. I wasn't cruel. I didn't bait him or mock him. I didn't let my anger surface when he spoke or acted as if nothing was wrong. Anger would have been too obvious, too easy for him to turn against me. Instead, I was patient. I smiled when necessary, listened when needed, and nodded when he expected agreement. Every interaction was calculated, every response measured. My patience wasn't passive. It was deliberate, a quiet weapon forged in the fire of betrayal. There were moments when my resolve was tested, when he leaned close to whisper something to me, or when he tried to charm me with gestures that had once made my heart flutter. A flicker of hurt would pass through me, but I buried it deep, knowing that letting it surface would weaken the control I had worked so hard to build. I reminded myself that this wasn't just about exposing him. It was about reclaiming my life, about demonstrating that his power over me was gone. I could feel the storm building. Though he had no idea, the calm before it was both tense and satisfying. Every day I maintained the facade. Every moment I acted normal was a rehearsal for the reckoning to come. I knew the truth would strike harder because it was hidden for so long, because it would land when he felt safest. And I welcomed that. I was ready, not with fury, not with chaos, but with clarity. When the time came, I would strike with precision. Every lie he had told, every manipulation, every hidden deceit, it would all be laid bare, and I would do it with composure because I had waited, I had planned, and I had grown stronger while pretending to be powerless. In that calm, I held everything, the truth, the proof, and soon, the reckoning. The night I decided to reveal everything felt surreal. Almost like stepping onto a stage I had been preparing for in secret. I invited our closest friends and family over, framing it as a casual dinner. Laughter, small talk, the kind of evening everyone expected to be ordinary. He came, smug as ever, with that self-assured smile and easy charm that had once made my heart flutter. He had no idea that the entire night would turn into a reckoning, that the world he thought he controlled was about to unravel before his eyes. As everyone settled in, I kept my composure. I poured drinks, exchanged pleasantries, laughed lightly at jokes, and waited for the perfect moment. Then, quietly, I began to bring out the evidence I had gathered. Printed messages, emails, screenshots, account details. Everything he had assumed was hidden forever. I laid them out carefully, methodically, so that everyone could see, so that no lie could be denied, no excuse could hold water. One by one, I revealed the truths he had buried beneath charm and deception. Each story, each lie, each hidden interaction unfolded slowly, like turning the pages of a book no one knew existed. I spoke calmly, my voice steady, letting the facts do the work while his expressions betrayed him. I watched the confident mask he had worn for years begin to crack. His words stumbled, hesitated, faltered as the room absorbed the truth. Around us, reactions rippled like waves. Friends gasped, eyes widening in shock. Family members leaned forward, stunned, trying to process what they were hearing. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into questions. But I spoke with clarity, answering each doubt, each defense he attempted, with undeniable evidence. I could feel the weight of truth pressing down, and with it came a quiet satisfaction that was nothing like revenge. It was the relief of finally reclaiming my life. He had spent years controlling the narrative, manipulating everyone around him, crafting a reality that left him above suspicion. But in that room, surrounded by people who mattered most, he was suddenly powerless. His charm was gone, replaced by confusion and desperation. Every carefully spun story he had told dissolved in an instant, leaving only him, confronted by the reality he had tried so hard to hide. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom that was almost intoxicating, not because I had humiliated him, not because he was exposed, but because the truth was finally mine to hold. The fear, the uncertainty, the quiet tension that had haunted me for months lifted, replaced by a steady calm. I could breathe again, knowing that the lies had no more power over me, that the person I had loved under false pretenses was finally revealed for who he truly was. And as I looked around the room, at friends who now understood, at family who could finally see the reality I had lived with, I felt a profound sense of closure. The man who had once seemed untouchable, who had thrived on secrecy and deception, was no longer in control. For the first time, I was. And in that moment, freedom wasn't just a feeling. It was a reality I could finally embrace. After the truth was revealed, everything changed almost immediately. The network of friends and acquaintances he had carefully cultivated, the social image he had spent years polishing, began to crumble before his eyes. People who had once laughed at his jokes, nodded at his stories, and praised his character now distanced themselves, their expressions carrying a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. He tried to speak, tried to explain, to weave some narrative that might soften the blow, but it was useless. The mountain of evidence I had laid out was undeniable, and no amount of charm or pleading could undo what had been exposed. For me, the aftermath was a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. The emotional toll of holding in the truth, of carefully plotting the right time to reveal it, had been immense. And now, as the room emptied of onlookers and the whispered questions lingered in the air, I found myself navigating an entirely new reality. Friends called, some in shock, some in cautious curiosity, while family members approached me carefully, unsure of how to process everything they had just witnessed. There were moments when I questioned whether I had done the right thing, whether the public exposure had been necessary. Doubt crept in at times, like shadows at the edge of my mind, whispering fears I couldn't quite silence. But alongside the fatigue and uncertainty, there was also pride. Quiet, steady, and wholly mine, not the kind born from revenge or malice, but from the act of reclaiming my own voice, of asserting my right to know the truth and to live free from deception. I had stood firm when fear and doubt threatened to paralyze me, and I had acted with clarity and purpose, ensuring that justice, not anger, guided my actions. That pride carried a weight that balanced the exhaustion. A reminder that I had not merely reacted, but had chosen the path of strength and composure. Over time, I realized the deeper lesson embedded in the experience. Lies can control you only if you allow them to. So long as deception remains hidden, it holds power, shaping reality, twisting perception, and keeping its victims in a state of uncertainty and fear. But once the truth is exposed, the balance shifts entirely. The person who deceives is suddenly vulnerable, left to face consequences that cannot be ignored, while the one who is wronged finds a new sense of clarity and autonomy. In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. The tension faded, though traces of the betrayal lingered like faint scars, reminders of the lessons learned. I began to notice a subtle shift in how I viewed the world and my place within it. I no longer felt the same fear of deception, no longer doubted the validity of my instincts. I had reclaimed not only my life, but also my self-assurance, understanding that truth is a force far stronger than any lie. And while he struggled with the fallout of his choices, facing the solitude and scrutiny that comes from exposure, I moved forward with a sense of quiet empowerment. The experience had been painful, humbling, and exhausting, yet it had also given me something invaluable: the knowledge that I could endure betrayal, confront falsehoods, and emerge not broken, but stronger, wiser, and free. Looking back, I realize now that the deepest pain from betrayal comes not just from the lies themselves, but from the moments we choose to ignore the warning signs. We convince ourselves that appearances are reality, that the life we see in front of us is the whole story, and in doing so, we give deception power over our hearts and minds. I learned the hard way that trust, once blind, can leave you vulnerable. But that same trust, when tempered with awareness and courage, can become a force for reclaiming your life. The real power, I discovered, never lay in revenge or humiliation. It wasn't in making him suffer, or in publicly shaming him, or in proving to the world that he had been wrong. The power lay in truth, steady, undeniable, and liberating. By standing firm, by carefully collecting every piece of evidence, by confronting deception calmly and decisively, I didn't just expose him. I freed myself. I reclaimed the life that had been quietly controlled by lies. And in that freedom, I found strength I didn't know I had. To anyone listening, I want you to understand this. When someone lies to you, it's never only about betrayal. It's about protecting something far more important: your peace, your dignity, and your future. Lies are meant to manipulate, to control, to make you doubt your instincts. But when truth becomes your ally, patience your weapon, and courage your shield, no deception can hold sway over you. You don't have to meet lies with fury or fire. You meet them with clarity, strategy, and steadfast resolve. I didn't need to destroy him completely. I didn't need to fight fire with fire. I didn't need to humiliate him in front of the world to prove a point. All I needed to do was reveal the reality he had spent so long hiding. And that revelation carried more weight than any anger or confrontation ever could. In doing so, I let the truth do the work. And in the quiet aftermath, I found a peace that anger could never give. Because in the end, the truth has a voice louder than lies, more enduring than deception, and more powerful than any act of retaliation. Lies can hide in shadows, but the truth shines in plain sight, patient and unwavering. And when you finally allow it to surface, when you finally stand on its side, you realize something profound. Freedom is not vengeance. Freedom is clarity, strength, and the courage to let reality speak for itself. I learned that lesson the hardest way, but it has stayed with me. A reminder that no matter how carefully someone hides behind charm, manipulation, or lies, the truth always finds its way. And when it does, it doesn't just reveal the deceiver. It restores the one who was wronged. It restores your voice, your power, and your life. Because in the end, the truth always speaks louder than lies.